too dark back there in the corner. Huh?
No, you're good. Perfect.
All right. Controlling hitting, pitching is about controlling a hitter's timing, okay? And so what we're going to learn to do is to take command of timing. Really, when guys square up a ball and hit it 100% on time, that is for a double or a home run, it happens because we hit his bat. We timed our pitch so that it would match up with the timing of his swing, and he didn't do a lot. We did it for him, okay? All fastballs are not the same. All pitches of a certain type are not the same, okay? If I have a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, because of the necessity for the hitter to speed up to get to an up-and-in pitch and slow himself down to get to a low-and-away pitch, the reaction pressure on the hitter for a pitch that's up here is a lot greater than the reaction pressure for a pitch that's down here. That is, he has to hit the ball 100% on time, he has to get the up-and-in pitch out here, but he has this much room to hit the low-and-away pitch, right? So Perry Husband, a really brilliant guy in California, came up with this idea about effective velocity, not just velocity, but the effective velocity, okay? The effective velocity is a combination of the radar gun speed and the location of the pitch, okay? Now, there's a line that we call the zero line that runs from the hitter's knees in the strike zone to the uppermost region away from his hands in the strike zone. And the timing for the hitter to get to those pitches are exactly the same. So to get to this pitch down here, he has to hit the ball about right here. To get to the one in the middle, he has to hit there. And to get the one that's up and away, it's the same thing. So this is called the zero line, okay? On this line, the effective velocity of the pitch is equivalent to the radar gun speed while you're on this line. We call that the zero line, okay? But if you get away from the hitter's hands on this side of the zero line, those pitches are going to lose effective velocity because the hitter has more time to react to a pitch that's away from his hands than he does to one that's up toward his hands, right? So basically, below the zero line, every 6 inches over and 6 inches down, the effective velocity is going to lose about 2.5 miles an hour. That's variable depending on the length of the guy's arms, how close he stands to the plate, those kind of things. But roughly 2.5 miles an hour, okay? So 6 inches over, 6 inches down, 2.5 miles an hour lost in effective velocity. So if I have a 90-mile-an-hour fastball and I put it 12 inches down here, I'm going to lose about 5 miles an hour, right? 12 inches over, 6 inches over, 6 inches down, 12 inches, whatever, okay? So that's going to give that hitter a lot more time to react to that pitch, right? So a 90-mile-an-hour fastball low and away might be 85, 83, somewhere around there, depending on how far out it is and how far he stands from the plate, right? By the same token, if I bring a fastball up and in above the zero line, every 6 inches up and every 6 inches closer to the hands, it's going to gain about 2.5 miles an hour in its effect on the hitter, meaning he has to be quicker to get to that pitch, right? So a 90-mile-an-hour fastball here, what we call the four spot right here, is going to be about 95, 96, sometimes 98, depending on how close he is and how far in you get it, okay? So we take advantage of that concept, and we try to move the ball to different areas of the strike zone so that our pitch has a different effective velocity on the hitter, okay? That's the first layer. Now, Perry met up with these statistician guys out in California. They created this program. They taught the program how to look in from center field camera in all these major league games for 2 seasons, and they get the radar gun speed and the location. They taught the computer how to read its effective velocity based on the location of the pitch and the radar gun speed, okay? And so what they found, they studied almost 1 million pitches over 2 seasons, and what they found is that 80% of the balls that were hit 100% on time, 80% of the balls that were squared up by hitters for doubles and home runs, hit on the screws, 80% of those balls were on pitches that were within 5 miles an hour in effective velocity of the previous pitch. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So 80% of the balls in the big leagues that were hit hard were on balls that were 5 miles an hour, within a 5 mile an hour range of that hit, of the last pitch that you showed that hitter, okay? So if I threw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball right here down the middle, right? And then I threw one that was a little bit further outside, but maybe was effective velocity of 86, right? It was within 5 miles an hour. That pitch was what we call at risk. It was a pitch that was at risk to get hit really hard. So the first layer of effective velocity and controlling the hitter's timing is to choose pitches which are not at risk, okay? And to do that, with a fastball, you could just jump back and forth across the zero line, right? You go 95, 85, 95, 85, but you become very predictable, right? And they'd be able to tell what you're doing, right? So that's one way to control it. The other is to change the pitch. You could go fastball and then an 8-mile-an-hour slower changeup, and a fastball and an 8-mile-an-hour slower changeup. But again, you become very predictable. But if you think about all the different permutations you could get to with 3 or 4 different pitches in an infinite number of locations, you can change the timing completely all the time, and the hitter will be way off. Now think about this. The hanging slider is like the bane of the pitcher's existence, right? Everybody says the hanging slider, you can't hang your slider, right? Well, they say that if you hang your slider, it gets hit hard, right? But it doesn't always get hard, does it? I mean, sometimes they don't hit it, they don't square it up, right? Sometimes you throw a slider that hangs up and they don't hit it, right? Well, here's why, and according to the theories and principles of effective velocity, here's why the hanging slider gets hit. It gets hit hard because of the imprint that you put on the hitter's subconscious from the previous pitch, okay? So we usually start out with fastball low and away, right? So we throw a fastball low and away, and if you're a 90-mile-an-hour guy, that may be 83, okay? It may lose 7 miles an hour in effective velocity. So let's say he doesn't square that pitch up. He just takes it for a strike, okay? And then your coach calls slider, and you get the slider up and in. And your sliders, let's say your slider's at 82 or 81, right? And you bring it closer to the hitter's hands, it's going to gain velocity, right? So you had 83 here, and you gained to maybe 84 here, right? With your slider, and that's why it got hit, because his timing was set to hit 83, or somewhere between 83 and 88, right? And you got right there in the middle of it, and he hit it hard, and that's why he hit it out. But if you had thrown a fastball here with an effective velocity of 95, and then threw the slider in the same spot with an effective velocity of 85, that's a 10-mile-an-hour spread. That ball's not going to get squared up. So the key in the first layer of effective velocity, let me just say this, it's not going to get squared up 80% of the time. Sometimes the hitter does his job and he does what he's supposed to do and he hits the ball. 20% of the time maybe, I'll take those odds over the course of a season, right? So the first layer of effective velocity is to choose pitches which are not at risk. Okay? Just know your spreads, know how much difference there is between your fastball, your breaking ball, and your changeup, and whatever other pitch you have, your cutter. And then choose pitches that are not at risk based on the last pitch, okay? Now, the second layer of EV is called the hitter's attention theory, okay? Now, a hitter times you up in the on-deck circle. He's sitting up there, he knows you, he's seen you before, he's hit off you maybe before, and he knows that you have a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. And so he's going to get ready to hit your 90. He's got to get geared up to hit your best fastball, right? So he comes to the plate, but also in the back of his mind, he kind of knows you have this and you have this, which are slower. So most hitters can't completely sell out to the fastball, your best fastball. They can't completely sell out because, quite frankly, they're worried about being embarrassed if they're sold out to the fastball and you throw something 10 miles an hour slower and they miss it by 4 feet. That embarrassment is something that we can take, or that fear of embarrassment is something we can take advantage of, okay? So they're not going to come to the plate ready to hit your best fastball. They're going to set their timing somewhere about 3 miles an hour lower than your best fastball. Now remember that the hitter's range, his attention range, is only about 5 or 6 miles an hour, right? So if he comes to the plate, the top end of his timing is set at 87, and it goes down to 82, right? So that's the range that on your first pitch you got to stay out of that window. So you don't want to throw your 90 on a zero line because that's, you know, he may hit that. You don't want to throw a 90 low and away, right? If we start out with a fastball low and away, right here, right? And he's set for 87, 82, and you're a 90-mile-an-hour guy, you've thrown a fastball that's somewhere between 83 and 85 miles an hour, and how many times have you you threw a great pitch on the outside corner, low and away, and the guy hits it on the screws for a double to right center field, right? That's because his timing was set for that window, okay? So Perry Husband likes to say that low and away is a nice place to visit, but you don't want to live there, okay? And you certainly don't want to start out there all the time. I'm not saying you never start out there, sometimes you do, but it's not as often as we typically tend to do, okay? So you have to know where the hitter's attention is, and then you have to choose a pitch that is outside of his range, okay? Now, that's the second layer of EV, is understanding the hitter's attention theory, okay? You gotta know what he's set for, what his timing's set for, and choose something that's outside that range. Now, the final, or the third phase of effective velocity is this concept of throwing through tunnels, okay? Ty, can you pull the tunnel out?